everybody. This is the host, Chris Baker, and you're watching the podcast or listening to the podcast, Tell Me Your Story. Today's special guest to tell his story from the very beginning, to talk about like his childhood, high school, college, what got him to his career, and just all his experiences to share it to the world. Give it up for Mr. Larry Burnett.
Yeah, who's that in the picture behind you, by the way?
Oh, the one right here? That is my
Yeah,
wife.
the one. That's you and your wife?
Yep.
Son of a gun. Well,
That
that's
is
nice.
me and my wife. That's one of our engagement photos. She blew it up, turned it into a blanket. And
How
yeah,
long ago was that?
actually, this is surprisingly, it's going to be our 1 year coming up this May.
Wow.
May 29th will be 1 year, one full year, and I'm still alive, everybody. I'm still alive.
There you go. And they said it wouldn't last, so
I'm still here.
doggone it. Well, good for you. Good for you.
Still here, man. Still here. But
Yeah.
very first question, where'd you grow up at? Where'd it start for you?
I was born in Bayonne, New Jersey, known as the home of the Bayonne bleeder Chuck Wepner, the boxer. Only there a short time, and then grew up in East Brunswick, New Jersey. Went through all of my schooling there, and then on to the University of Tulsa, and from there, many stops along the career road.
Talk about your childhood just a little bit. Like, talk about just like how it was without technology. Just growing up at a time where you had
You
you
mean
had, you had
back
to
in
be
the old
outside.
days?
Yes. Take us
Yeah,
back.
well, we actually had running water and we had electricity, so that was good. That was good. Um, it's amazing to see how technology has changed over the years. Um, we sat around a radio when I was a kid and listened to radio shows and listened to boxing and listened to games, and then we got a TV, and then I guess early '60s, my parents made a big splurge and bought a color TV, and that was a big deal, and we got it. They wanted to do it like a Christmas present, but my mom was a big fan of the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, and she thought, wouldn't that be great to see that in color? And so we got it in early, and we watched that. Um, we grew up in it was a Cape Cod style house, um, farms nearby, schools nearby, um, one bathroom, one telephone, no cell phones. Um, it was pretty basic, but it was what we knew, and it was great. Childhood was great. Had friends around. We're always playing sports. My backyard was kind of the gathering place for
Yeah.
the neighborhood kids. Whatever was in season, we played it in my backyard. And the interesting thing is that very early in my life, I knew that I liked sports. And one of the things we would do is my backyard was sliced up so that we had bases. We had a backstop. We had a pitching rubber and a home plate. We had a backboard up on the tree. Um, and whenever we would play a game or simulate a game, we would call the game. Whether it was the old New York Mets with Marv Throneberry or Ed Kranepool or Tom Seaver, or the Giants with Willie Mays and McCovey and all of those guys. St. Louis Cardinals, Ken Boyer, Bill White. Uh, we would call the games, and so it was kind of amazing that that direction continued, and that's what I ended up doing, covering sports and calling games.
It just all started in the childhood. That little skill that you guys developed, what went from being just, backyard fun, turned
Yeah,
into
it's exactly what it was. I mean, it was bottom of the ninth inning. Willie Mays is at the plate. Here's the pitch, and we'd throw the ball down, and one of us would grab it. And Who is it? Whoever was playing, Bud Harrelson's got it, over to Crane Pool for the out, and there it is. It's all over, or Bill Russell's got it. Clock running down, shot is up, Celtics win, that kind of thing. That's what we did, and we did it for hours and hours and hours, and just had a great time doing it.
And when did you know exactly that this is what your calling was? This is what you wanted to do for a career?
It's interesting. I had some knee injuries, so I didn't play football, didn't play basketball in high school, but I did play baseball, and I thought I had a chance to play collegiately or possibly professionally. And then as I went along, I found out you have to have talent to do that, and mine was limited. So what am I going to do? I always like to be in front of people. I like to entertain. I like to talk to people, and I like sports. So if you go back to my high school yearbook, my senior year, under my amazing picture, it says ambition, and I put sports broadcasting. So I figured I could combine all these things and do what I enjoyed, and hopefully make a living out of it. And fortunately, all these years later, I've been able to do that. One of the few people I know that in their high school yearbook put down their ambition and actually went and did that.
Just how cool that is. Just thinking about it just now, just like the fact that you were able to write it out, put it into, because a lot of times what happens is people go back and look at their high school memories, look at what people wrote, and you see their careers and they're nowhere near what they were looking at. And then they
Yeah,
see
well,
yours.
and a lot of that is just, as you mature, your interests change, your mentality changes. It's like I told my daughters when they were going to college. I said, what am I going to major in? What am I? I said, it really doesn't matter a whole lot what you major in at the start. Go in and take some general education courses, maybe take an elective, see if you find something that you like, and then focus on that. Because, and I don't know what the percentages are, but I'd say the percentages are probably pretty high that the majority of people who go in with one major come out with other goals or other jobs or other occupations that they eventually go into maybe for the rest of their life. So, things change.
Yeah, but I could say, like for me, for example, when I first went to Toledo, I was pretty much undecided, and my
By the way, the
major.
home of Jamie Farr, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
The home of Jamie Farr, famous from MASH.
Yep, that
There you
that's
go.
me. But anyway, so when I first went to Toledo, my major was international foreign business. That's when was what I first started off as.
Yeah.
And then like you said, as you mature and you get more into like knowing what you want to do in life, that's when I began to really realize I wanted to get into like journalism and just, because I like talking to people. Like you said, it's easy to talk to people and it just comes easy to you. Before you know it, that's what I switched over to, and
Yeah.
here I am now.
Yeah, and a lot of it too is you may come out with a great degree, but there's no job for you.
Yep.
So so you got to find something else to do. And more that's become the case. There's people come out of college and they've got all these great credentials, but the jobs aren't there, and you got to find a way to make a living. So you do it.
And I think really what you're hitting on right there is be sure it's something that you want to do, not somebody else telling you to do something. Because this is part of your life. This is your life. You want to make sure this is what you want to do
Yeah,
with it.
yeah. It's an old cliche that if you work at something that you enjoy, you'll never work a day in your life. Well, it's just not true because there's work involved in all of this. But if you find something that you enjoy, it makes going to work that much easier. And the nice thing about being in sportscasting, sports journalism, is something different every day. It's you're not going in 9 to 5. You're going in when something's happening, and you're going in when nothing's happening, but then all of a sudden something does happen. You're going in putting your sportscast together for that night, and this happens and that happens, and you've got to throw the whole thing out the window and start all over. And here's what you're doing. Um, and I love that. I love that aspect of it, is that you got to be on your toes all the time. And there are times you're on the air and things change, and you've got a producer talking in your ear saying, okay, well, that story's not there. We'll have to go on to the next one, or we've got a guest on the line. Daryl Strawberry's hooked up and ready to go. And so you're reading and talking and listening in your ear, and reconfiguring things on the fly. And I always loved that aspect of the business.
And just trying to stay focused and trying to stay right there in the present moment and
Well,
not flip
it
up.
from doing play by play and doing it at the professional level, you've got your headset on, and you're hearing the natural sound. You're hearing the producer talking to you in your ear. Um, if you're lucky, you've got a stat person next to you, and they're handing you stats. And then you've got an associate producer who's handing you a card to read for the commercial, or the promo that needs to be done. And so it's rock and roll. It's back and forth. And I found I used to do uh, stock car racing back in Tulsa. I called stock car races, and for one reason or another, I went back a few years later and sat in the stands. I was bored to death because I didn't have anybody handing me anything. I didn't have to rock and roll. I didn't have to take care of this, that. I was just there watching. It was like, oh man, what happened? Um, a few years ago, I would have been just thrilled to sit there and watch the races. But after you get into that mode, um, it kind of changes your whole way of thinking.
Now, when you first got started, did you go to college for it, or
I did. I did. A long story short, but I went from New Jersey to the University of Tulsa in Oklahoma. And everybody says, well, how did you do that? Um, I was originally going to go to West Virginia University. They had filled their out of state quota. So I would have had to wait a semester or a year to go in. I had a visit at a college in Pittsburgh, and it was right in the middle of town. And I looked out the window of the dorm. It was an old hotel that they had turned into a dorm. And I saw the smokestacks and everything, and I said, I need to be able to get onto some grass and throw a ball around, do something. I can't live this way. Then I checked into Southern Illinois University. They had race riots that spring, and I was like up in the air. It's like almost June, and I haven't got a school to go to. And I went to my guidance counselor, uh, guidance in quotes, and said, what am I going to do? I want to go someplace to study journalism and broadcasting. I want to play baseball, and I want to go someplace where it's warm all the time. He said, go to Tulsa. It's almost tropical there. And they had a good baseball program. I met with some people in New York. They showed a film. Sight unseen, I fly out to Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so many of the things that the guidance counselor told me just weren't true. Um, First of all, I was there a month, and the weather changed. I don't know if you remember the old CPO jackets they had, their light jackets that buttoned up. That was the warmest thing I had. And I had to have them send out my winter clothes because it got cold. A tornado came in. I saw that for the first time.
hold on,
But
wait,
anyway,
hold on, wait,
I was
wait.
there. I
One second,
walked
one
onto the
second.
baseball team, and that summer I went back to New Jersey, and I was playing in a men's league, and playing at our high school field. Now, our high school, East Brunswick High School, was up on a hill, and because of that, they put the fire sirens and the air raid sirens up on big poles so that when they blasted, people could hear it all over the township.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm playing second base. Guy hits a pop fly down the first base line. I go over for it full speed. Right fielder comes in for it full speed. and siren goes off.
Uh-oh.
I call for it. He doesn't hear me. I get to the first base line. The ball hits my glove. His shoulder hits my face and busted my cheekbone in 3 places and put the mastoid bone all the way down here.
Ooh.
Um, so I was planning to transfer to West Virginia University that summer, but because of that, I didn't. I played out my time at Tulsa, and I did. I went there to study journalism and broadcasting. Interestingly enough, I had to audition for the campus radio station my freshman year, and I didn't make the cut. They uh, they didn't think I was good enough that year.
Wow.
Um, so that was a bit humbling. But it kind of pushed me to kick things into gear a little more and take it a little more seriously. And from there, I got some opportunities on campus and in other places, and it turned into a livelihood.
And just how did you feel though when they told you you weren't good enough? Did
It was terrible. I mean,
that?
listen, most of us in this business have rather big egos. We think we're pretty hot stuff. Um, so I actually went over to one of the buildings on campus, and it was just like a cut list in high school sports. The coach puts it up on the wall, and if your name's not here, you're not there. And my name wasn't there. And I went in and asked the professor, and he said, well, you need to work on some things and this and that and the other thing. And so from there, we just pushed forward and turned it into something. But no, it was that was humbling. That was humbling.
Now, for anybody that has dealt with a similar situation or is currently going through that right now, what would your advice be to that person? How did you handle it?
Well, I think you have two choices. One is you go hide in your room and stick your head in the pillow and turn the lights out and say the end is near. The other is you say, you know what? Maybe there's three things. The other is you say I'm going to kick this into gear and take it up a notch. And the other is you say, you know what? I still think I'm pretty darn good, and I'm going to show them. And I think mine was a combination of the last two. You got to stick with it. If it's really what you want to do, you got to stick with it. Listen, I I don't have the thickest skin in the world. Um, I tend to take things personally. I don't like to be criticized, but if you're going to get into this business, you better put your suit of armor on because even more and more, especially today, the more you say, the higher the percentage that you're going to say something that's going to upset somebody, and they're going to come back at you. And I have somewhere in my office, I have a stack of rejection letters from early on in my job searches, and not that that hasn't stopped in recent years. I've gotten some recent years too. Um, but yeah, if you can't take rejection, if you can't take criticism, um, find something else. Find something else to do because it can get tougher.
And I would say not just for that, not just broadcasting, but everything you go after. And I believe without a doubt, like it's been said by many people, even if you listen to motivational speakers, that you're going to get a lot of no's before you get that first yes.
Yeah,
And you have to be willing to keep fighting for it because
yeah, and yet
it'll be worth
you have to understand that as tough as this is for me to say, you don't know everything.
it.
Even at this point in my life, I don't actually. The older I get, the more I realize how much I don't know. I used to think I had all the answers. Now I can't even remember half the questions. It's just you got to stick with it. If you want it, you got to work for it. People always say nothing comes easy, and it's the absolute truth. And if you're sitting back saying, somebody's going to write a ticket for me, and I'm going to be in great shape. Um, I talk to people in classes all the time. They say, "Well, I'm on the campus radio station. Somebody's going to hear me, and if you think somebody's going to listen to you on your little station, and say, come to New York City and work for ABC or go to work for CNN, or it ain't going to happen. It ain't going to happen. You got to work and you've got to make the contacts and you've got to network. Um, and you've got to be good. You may have all the contacts in the world. If you're not good, sooner or later it's going to show up, and you'll find out that maybe you're not that good.
Yeah, and you have to be, yeah, that, like you said, though, you have to be willing to accept that, willing to keep yourself open, to be willing to learn more and more. Because, like you
Yeah,
said, you don't know everything. And that's, like, I'm glad I've learned that, at a young age, that you have to be open like a sponge just to keep learning, to keep taking all that knowledge in. Whoever you go to, be willing to be a student of life. Just keep
yeah,
learning.
yeah. The other side of it too is, and I say this to groups all the time, is get experiences, whether it's music, movies, art, books, travel, whatever it is. Get those experiences because you never know when you can wrap them into something and work them into your sportscast, your newscast, or your play-by-play job. Um, you pull a line from a movie, and all of a sudden, you got something, a little twist on something in a play-by-play that you're doing. Um, you make a comparison to something that's happening in the news. Um, these are all little twists that can make what you do a little more unique than maybe what somebody else is doing. And just getting those experiences, they're life experiences. If for nothing else, get them for your life. But as an added bonus, they can work into your job description as well.
And just as we go on to the next topic now,
Sure.
talk about what it was like getting your first job after after being humbled and finally getting that next chance. How long did it take you before you took that next chance, actually?
Boy, that's a tough. But it brings up um, talking about life experiences. Uh, my first job was at as a recreation counselor when I was a freshman in high school. I then went to work for the Board of Education on summers, and I did sandblasting, and I sanded wooden school floors and refinished them. Um, I did all these horrendous, and I worked with guys who were 50 or 60 years old, and they hated coming to work every day. And they would stand and lean on their shovel and watch me work, um, and they just complain. And they get there in the morning. When's our coffee break? After that, they'd say, when's lunch? Okay, when's our next coffee break? When do we leave? They hated every minute of it. And I swore to myself I would not do a job that I couldn't enjoy. I just, I saw guys hate coming to work every day, every day. And who knows how many years they had left. They hated every day. So that pushed me towards let's find something that I want to do. After in college, I think my sophomore or junior year, the dean of communications came into the room one day and he said, "Could I talk to you?" And I said, "Sure." He said, "There's a little radio station in Cushing, Oklahoma that needs somebody to do their high school football games. Are you interested?" I said, "Yeah, sure." I had no idea where Cushing, Oklahoma was. Um, I had an old 66 Chevy Biscayne. Um, and the way you know the difference between the Chevy Biscayne and the Bel Air is that the Biscayne was so basic it didn't even have the metal stripping on the side that the Bel Air had. So anyway, I find out that the radio station is a daytime only station. So I went up and met with the people. Okay, I'll do the games fine, sure. Um, I would drive up, and it was probably, I don't know, 100 miles or so to get there. Um, they would leave an old Wallensack reel to reel tape recorder in the garage with a microphone. I would go in and take it, go to the ball game, set it up, and we would do the games. Now, because it was a daytime station. They re-aired the game on Saturday mornings. So they didn't want that, they wanted this thing to move. So I would do my opening, I would start the game, and in between every play we'd stop the tape, and then when they came to the line, I'd start it again, and then we'd stop it, and then at halftime we'd do a little thing, we'd stop it, start it up. So this one game, Cushing had this running back. His name was Donnie Dye. Was recruited to go to Notre Dame. He was really good. And they kick off to Donnie, and he runs it back like 94 yards for a touchdown. And I'm calling it, and I've got it nailed. And I look down. I had not started the tape recorder.
Oh no.
So what the heck am I going to do? And I looked around, and people were looking at me in the press box, and I said, "We're going to have to do it again, folks." And I started the tape, and I started off just like they were kicking off, and the people in the press box are going, giving me crowd noise. We just did the whole thing, put the tape down, put it back in the garage. They played it the next morning. Nobody knew the difference. Nobody knew the difference.
That's perfect, man.
You got to improvise sometimes, Chris.
And it just worked out, man. Could have been a bad thing turned into a good thing because you
Well,
were able to think on it.
that's the deal. You have to be, you have to think on your feet. Sometimes you just got to save your own butt, and you got to figure out creative ways to do it. And in doing so, you realize that you can do it, and that if you run into another situation, you have a confidence. I can find a way out of this. I can figure out a way to make this work. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But the more successes you have, the better you feel about your own confidence in
Yeah.
getting it done. So that was my first job. They paid me $15 a game, $15 a game. And after the first week, they upped it to 20. I was so good.
Hey.
Cooked it up to 20. And I was driving all over Oklahoma, Sperry, Oklahoma. I can't think the school that Troy Aikman played at. I can't think of the name of the town, but you talk about learning situations. I get down there, they say, we don't have any room for you in the press box, but we can run an extension cord out to the stands. So I'm sitting out in the stands in whatever it was, October, November, whatever, in Oklahoma. I'm calling the game from the stands. Um, not my favorite way to do it, but I realized I could do it. And I had a guy, Sperry, Oklahoma. I've got the PA announcer right next to me, like right next to me in the press box. And he's basically calling play by play. And I'm trying to do it, and I've got my hands cupped around the microphone trying to keep him out of it. But, you do it, and you hop in your car, and you put the tape machine back in the garage, and, go home and hope it works.
And then, like in that situation, did you ever have to like re-record over top of that because he was too loud? And
Couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. I mean, it was as the game was in progress. It worked out okay. It's just situations are not always going to be ideal. Um, and people need to realize that. And that, as you said earlier, that's not just in broadcasting. It's in any business you go into. You go in with your eyes open and say, okay, we're going to make the best of this no matter what. But if you go in with tunnel vision and say, I can't handle it. You know what? I was thinking about this just the other day. I like to watch the Dodgers play, particularly when Kershaw pitches. I love to watch when he pitches. But a few years ago, they had a center fielder named Matt Kemp. And he basically told them, I can only play center field. I don't want to play anywhere else. Look at the Dodgers now, the versatility they have with all the guys who can play different positions and stuff. For somebody to say, I can only play one position, that's all I'm good at, makes no sense whatsoever. So that flexibility, that openness, that versatility that the Dodgers show now is something that I think helps all of us as we look into whatever it is we decide to do.
Yeah, and then like you said though, it really comes down to just being on your toes and having that confidence once you're doing it. The more you do, like you're just open to whatever's thrown at you and you're able to handle it like quickly. That
Yeah.
confidence continues to grow. And like he's with him being like saying that he could only play the center field, that shows that he didn't really have a lot of confidence in himself to do these other positions.
And didn't really care about his team.
Yeah,
Didn't matter what was best for the team. It mattered what was best for him.
yeah,
And that, that's I just love to watch. Chris Taylor plays here, there, and there, and Muncy plays here, there, and there, and you move Taylor over. I love that. I mean, when I played high school ball, um, at one point or another, I played pretty much every position on the field. I pitched mostly, um, but wherever they needed me, I just wanted to play. I wanted to play and get in my swings. Um, so I don't understand that mentality, and I like the fact that it's changed so dramatically on that team.
and I think really it's an important lesson that is needs to be kind of talked about a little bit more here. No matter what job you're doing, just always remember to be flexible. Don't just. I hear too many that like nowadays where kids are saying, "Oh, I'm just like I'm only assigned to do this position. This is the job that they gave
Right.
me. I'm gonna stick to this." Like, no, man. You want to be flexible. That way you can grow with that company and learn more, have more opportunities. If you're
Yeah.
gonna just do one position, you're not gonna make it very far.
The other side of it is this: if you only play one position, if you only do one job, that's you only know it from that perspective. You don't. Let's say you only play first base. Okay, if you go over and play third base for a couple games, you're going to realize the ball comes down there pretty fast,
Hmm.
and you've got to make some quick decisions, and you've got to have a gun to get that ball over. There's a lot of things you've got to do, so you've got a new perspective on what is expected of a third baseman. When I first got started in television, I was doing directing, producing. I was the traffic manager. I did sales, all of these things. Um, and as I grew in the business, the nice thing was that gave me a perspective of what a director can and can't do, what a director expects from talent and needs from talent. Um, and you don't sit out there and stomp and yell and say, I need this and come on, get this. You have a new admiration for what it takes to get the job done behind the cameras and in the control room. And because of that, you can have a better relationship with the people that you work with because you understand what goes on with their job. So I think that helped me along the way. Um, is that I did have to direct and I did have to work with people and I did have to handle sales, all of those things. A lot of which I never wanted to do, but that was part of the job at that point.
All right, I just had this pop in my head. A quick question for you. What year was this when you were driving back and forth?
This would have been like 1972, 73.
72.
Yeah.
And like
And
how long?
by the way, we were talking about gas prices before
Yeah,
we
that's
went
what I
on.
was just about to ask you.
Tulsa, Oklahoma. I was at TU from 1970 to 74. At the time I was there, they had gas wars where the oil companies would fight with each other to compete, and the prices would go down, 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 down. I swear to you, this is true, Chris, and you can look it up. I bought gas in Tulsa, Oklahoma during the early 70s for 24 cents a gallon.
Can I go back?
Please, please. I saw something the other day. Somebody said, "Hey, what are you griping about? I filled up my tank for $22." Of course, it was my lawnmower, but you know, that's where we're at. But yeah, 24 cents a gallon.
24 cents. And during the pandemic, here it got to be, I think the lowest it got to was $1.32.
Oh boy. Yeah. Yeah, just amazing. Just
And then,
amazing.
like, and I drive a Kia Soul, so I only had to put like $5 in, and my car was full.
There you go. There
And
you
I'm like,
go.
can we go back
You
to
know,
those
when I
days?
was growing up, my dad would go to the Esso station, which became Exxon and whatever else, and he'd say, give me $2 worth, and he'd put it in our 52 Pontiac or whatever it was, and we'd be good for a long time. And those were gas burners back then, but um, man, times have changed, huh?
Yeah, I'm just thinking too, like, so you're not really losing much when you're making $20. You're making $20, a game. So you're not really losing nothing
No,
compared to
not
like
on
now.
gas, not on gas. Listen, I thought it was great. You know, $15 a game bumped me up to 20. I mean, I can remember back when it was like late 50s. My dad would pull the old Pontiac into the Esso station, which eventually became the Exxon station, which eventually became something else. Um, he'd say, give me $2 worth, and that was good enough to get that big old boat around for, who knows how long. And those were gas burners back then, so times have really changed.
And now, as we get further into the future, you've seen the car go from a boat to now
Oh,
it's shrinking every year.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I see those smart cars on the road, and I think, my God, how do they get into those things? How do they drive them? I don't know, but I mean, the good news is that there's at least a mentality now that we need to be conserving and trying to get ourselves off of fossil fuels. We need to worry more about polluting the air than about having 600 horsepower under the hood. Um, and I think we're headed in the right direction. Whether we're doing it quickly enough, I don't know. I know I was just talking about the lease on my car, and I talked to the dealer and I said, I'd be interested in maybe a hybrid down the road. And he said, well, no, they're not going to make hybrids. They're going straight to electric cars. There's just nothing in between anymore. That's the next move. So I hope they can pull it off and make it work. Because we got to do something. We got to save this planet, or at least make the best of it that we can with the time that we have.
Yep, and that's what I began to tell my wife about. I'm like, I'm actually kind of looking into these electric cars, and I'm kind of more curious about just how they drive and everything about them. For her, she
Yeah.
can't even charge her phone. So I'm
well,
like, let
well,
alone
I hope
charge a
she's not
car.
listening to this, or you may not make it to the second anniversary. Um, but my concern is where are the charging stations, and how far can you go, and are you going to get stuck somewhere where there's no charging station? And then my other thought is this, and this is my own conspiracy theory. I can just see our government switching us over to all electric, and then the price of electricity skyrockets the
Yeah.
way the gas prices have. Um, it wouldn't surprise me at all if they took advantage of us in that way. Let's do this because it makes sense and it's good for the planet, but in the process, boom, somebody's going to make a ton of money off of us.
Now, do you actually see any of where you can charge the charging stations at anywhere out there?
I haven't seen one. I,
I'd,
I take that back. There are some parking lots like I can't think of where it is, but I know I've seen, this for electric cars, like maybe two spots set aside with a charging station, but not many, and certainly not along the freeways. I haven't
no,
seen those at all.
like the only places I've seen them at is Myers. Like they're the only ones I've actually seen have the electric station where you can park
Yeah,
and charge. But then I was thinking like, so what do you do? Say you're out in the middle, you're just out in the boonies, man, driving, and you forget to charge your car,
yeah,
and you run out. So what do you
yeah. Well,
do?
and the other part of it is in your car. If you say, "Well, I'm going to make it to the next rest stop. I'm going to make it to the next gas station." If you don't, well, you can take the can out of your car and go fill it up with gas and come back. What do you do if it's an electric car? You're gonna how are you gonna bring the electricity back?
Exactly.
I don't know. Hopefully, there's a solution there somewhere. I think the concept is good. I just haven't seen it how it's going to play out.
Another thing I worry about them too is like, because of how they make everything nowadays, where it only lasts for about 2 years. So
Oh
say
yeah.
you get a car, and the battery's good, it charges fast, but 2 years down the line, all of a sudden you notice that it starts dying quicker and quicker and quicker.
Yeah.
And then you come across where a lot of what's happening nowadays is where people are having problems with their cars because they're like computers. So
Yeah.
say you have a problem, like if you ever noticed with a phone is what I'm getting at, is where it goes from like, okay, you're at 30%, you're sure you can make it to your house and put that bad boy on the charger.
Yeah.
Is the same thing gonna happen to your car? You're gonna have it at 30%, you're like, okay, I can get to the next town, and then all of a sudden that 30% goes.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. And the other part of it is, you mentioned with computers and phones and things, they'll come out with the next model, and all of a sudden the plug-in for that battery doesn't fit anymore. So you have to buy a different cord to go with it. So we're going to deal with that with electric cars too. I don't know. I don't know. Again, I the concept is good. I like the idea, but show me how it's going to work, and then we'll talk about it.
I always said when I was younger, when we started having these conversations, I'm gonna be the one still driving on the ground while everybody's flying in
Everybody else is up in the air.
the air.
Yeah, well, sooner or later, like there's not enough congestion in the air right now. Um, but the fact, I mean, the things that I've seen in my lifetime, um, with space shuttles and men on the moon, and just you know, I had a cell phone back like 1990, and it was the size of a small refrigerator. And now look at the way it is. Um, that we talked about my first color TV. We didn't have remote controls. You got up and we only had 3 channels, 4 channels in the New York area. Um, you got up and changed the channels. Now I got 4 remotes. I I I, I don't know what they do half the time. Um, I just said, okay, I need this remote to get to this, and this. Can they not put it into one single remote that can do it? Apparently not. I haven't found it.
And not only that, now we're living in a time where you can control the TV with your phone.
Exactly. You control everything with your phone. You
Exactly.
can turn on your lights. You can turn on the hot tub. Whatever. So, hey, you know, technology is great, and you want it to continually improve, and make lives better. It just sometimes it seems like it's a bit out of control.
Yeah. And how do you feel? I mean, just growing up at a time where, like you said, you went from listening to like the family time, you're listening to the radio, and then you see the TV come into play, and now you're
Yeah,
seeing all this other stuff come into play. How do you feel about that?
it's progress. I don't want to live in a world that's going to stay the same. I want it to get better, and I want to be a part of it. I'm not always the first person to jump on board a new idea, but once I see that it works, I'm not stupid enough not to get, involved with it. Um, no, you don't want to stand still. You want to live in a world that's always moving forward and always looking to improve. And hopefully, there's people out there, coming up with cures for diseases and things like. I mean, look at that. I mean, when I was a kid, polio was a big deal, and they got a vaccine and they eradicated that for the most part. Smallpox was a big deal. We had to be, vaccinated for that. Um, I mean, the advances in medicine and technology are just they've been phenomenal, and I hope that continues. It should.
And when so you went from like just technology just taking off really, and into your career a little bit more. Is like you said you went from having a tape recorder pretty much a little cassette,
Mm.
and now
It wasn't a cassette. It wasn't a cassette. It was a reel-to-reel tape recorder.
oh man.
Reel-to-reel tape recorder.
And then
Yeah.
just going from that, and then what was it like just going to the next stage as the progress kept going?
Well, I'll tell you, I got my first job in commercial television was, at a, TV station, KXII TV, in Sherman, Texas. It was 66 miles north of Dallas. And you're not going to believe this. I was working in Stillwater, Oklahoma at the time. I drove down there for my audition or visit, and they said, well, we do all of our local stories on 35 millimeter slides. I said, what? Yeah, we do all, we have a film camera, but we don't, that's mainly for sales and promotion. And we do all of our local stories on 35 millimeter slides. And people don't believe me when I tell them this. And they said, you know how to use a 35 millimeter camera, right? And I'd never used one before in my life. And I said, sure, absolutely. Um, and they gave me the job, and I moved to Sherman, Texas. And darned if I didn't go out to the high school games and with a 35 millimeter camera and take pictures. And then I had a cassette recorder at that time, Chris, and I would interview the coach. I'd come back, we'd develop the slides, we'd edit the interview with the coach, and I'd put the slides into a script, and that's how we did our stories. That was for about the first 6 months I was there. Then they got what we called a mini cam unit back then, electronic photography. It wasn't very mini. It was a big, heavy camera. It had electronics and stuff. I talked them into letting me take it down to the Dallas Cowboy games, and the Cowboys gave us credentials. And I had a big, hefty photographer. We had to put the unit on a dolly, on a metal dolly, like you see at Home Depot, those things, and move it along the sidelines, and then extend the camera and shoot from the shoulder with that thing. And that's how big it was. And now you see people out doing news stories with their phones or these little bitty cameras and things. So that's changed radically. It's incredible.
And just how beautiful that is. And you're just thinking back, even probably now as you're reflecting back into that, just how much a pain that was compared to like how easy it is nowadays just to have a one-on-one conversation.
Speaking about pain, I just talked to a buddy of mine who was one of the originals at ESPN, photographer, and a great one. Just had shoulder surgery because of all the years of lofting those heavy cameras, those TK-76s and the Ikagamis, and running to cover things and saying, well, I don't need a tripod, I'll just do it on my shoulder. And I can't tell you how many guys have been in pain from lugging that stuff around, and now it's a different ballgame.
Yeah, and I could only imagine just a change up and seeing like going from that big old,
Oh
and
yeah,
then now all of a
yeah.
sudden everybody's
I,
everybody's a cameraman.
I'll tell you a quick story. When I first interviewed at ESPN, this was back maybe 1980 or whatever. They'd just gone on the air in '79, and at that point, ESPN was one building, and the newsroom was one room, and it was furnished with old wooden school teachers' desks that they had gotten from the Bristol Board of Education when they were throwing them out. And I looked up on the back wall, and there was an RCA TK-76 camera, blue and white camera, mounted on a Stanley garage door opener on a track across the back wall. And I thought, what the heck is that for? Well, they wanted to be high tech. So when they did their updates, somebody would press an actual garage door opener and make the camera move across the back wall. So it made it look like they were high tech and had moving cameras.
Ah, so
But
that's
that's what
cool.
ESPN was back then. So you talk about difference in technology. And now it's a campus unto itself. They've got their own food courts and gymnasiums and buildings on top of buildings. It's like a real campus. Um, But that's what it was like at the start. One building, small rooms, and a couple of satellite dishes out on the street.
So, what ended up being like after after you did all the football games, and what was your first big break?
Boy, um, I worked in Sherman for a while, and Sherman was interesting, Chris. Sherman, because it was the only station in the area, got to choose whatever programming they wanted from the networks. So at that point, um, let's say the Today Show and NBC was the hot show. They take NBC programming in the morning, and then in the evening it was Walter Cronkite and the evening news, and so they took CBS programming. And then because Johnny Carson was big at night, they went back to NBC. So it was just a hodgepodge. Um, it was an amazing place. But I went from there. I went back to Tulsa, did weekends there for KOTV Channel 6. Um, then got a job working in Miami doing weekends for the NBC station there. And that was great because I got to work with the Dolphins and Don Shula, um, all kinds of opportunities down there with golf and tennis and spring training. Um, and then I guess the break was I did a story about a Dolphin fan, a guy who was in a wheelchair, who was just there at all the practices, and we did a nice feature on it. I won an Emmy for it, and it turned out that his nephew worked at ESPN, and the guy said, if you want, I'll get your tape to him, and so they did, um, and that's when I went up and visited. But it's one of the strangest things, and I will write a book, and this will be in there. Um, I visited with the news director. They showed me around. I went up to visit with the vice president, and he said this, and the other. And why don't I said, well, they wanted me to do the overnight show, the 2:30 a.m. Eastern time show. And I said, I just got married. Let me go back and talk to my wife and see. And we said, yeah, okay. So I called back to news director. I said, I'm interested. He said, okay, I'll put you through to the VP. Okay, great. This will be great. I said, so what's the salary? And he said, well, we can't tell you that. I said, what? No, we can't tell you that until you commit to the job. I said, I came up and visited. I went back. I talked to my wife. We said we would do the overnight show. And now you won't tell me what you're going to pay me? No, we can't tell you that. I got off the phone with him, called up the news director. I said, what's going on? He said, I have no idea. I said, well, listen, I've got an opportunity to go to work in Minneapolis. And if you guys can't tell me what you're going to pay me, I'm just going to take the other offer. And they wouldn't tell me.
Hmm.
They wouldn't tell me. So I went up to Minneapolis and worked there for a couple of years. And then eventually another opportunity came about at ESPN. But but interestingly enough, at that point, they wouldn't give me a contract. We're not giving contracts at this point. So you just have to come here and then, we'll tell you what we'll pay you, but we won't put anything in writing. So I did. I went and it turned out fine. But so big break, I don't know. I don't know there was any one thing, but that guy that I did the feature on handing the tape off certainly didn't hurt.
Yeah, that puts you in the right position. You got a hold of you.
Well, a lot of it is who you know and somebody who can get something to somebody else. Um, it's just the way it is.
Important note right here. For the watcher listener, build those connections. They can
Yeah.
help you out in
Oh
the
yeah.
long run.
Yeah. If you think and believe me, this was my mentality for a long time. If you think that you can do it on your own, you can't. You can't. You need an assist here and there. You need a contact here and there. You need to network whether you like it or not. People don't like it when you call them only when you need something. They want to know that you're there and reliable, and that you kind of care about them even if you don't. Um, so yeah, all that stuff is important.
All right. Then the next question. Um, well, we covered pretty much a good start of the career. Where were you at the longest?
Ooh, the longest. I was at well, the longest gig I had was doing LA Sparks WNBA games. I did that for 16 years in Los Angeles. I worked at Prime Ticket in Los Angeles for 5 years, then went over to the Lakers radio network for 5 or 6 years. But the longest was 16 years calling LA Sparks games.
All right. First professional game that you covered.
That I covered.
Yeah.
Well, that would have been that probably would have been the Dallas Cowboys. Going down and standing on the sidelines, and Tom Landry was the coach back then, and Roger Staubach was the quarterback. So that was my first real experience of being in a professional arena or stadium, um, being there and able to be at the press conference with the coach, um, those kind of things. Be in a locker room. Um, I would say that was probably it. I had some minor league stuff when I was in college, and Tulsa Drillers were the St. Louis Cardinals farm team back then, AAA team. But big time stuff, probably Cowboys down in Dallas.
And then, like, looking back at your career and, seeing what guys are considered legends now, how does it feel just knowing that you got the chance to cover these
Oh,
guys?
you know, it's weird because there are times I look back on what I've done and I'm very impressed, but there's still a part of me that says there's things to do, or you didn't do this, or you didn't work for Wide World of Sports, um, or you didn't call national games, for ABC or whatever. Um, but then if I allow myself to step back and look, um, man, you talk about Don Shula, Tom Landry. Shula did his coaches show in our TV station in Miami. Um, there were times we'd fly him in by helicopter from the training site into our helipad, and he'd come in and do it. Howard Schnellenberger was coaching Miami football back then. I did his coaches show at the TV station. Ron Frazier was coaching baseball at Miami back then. Um, but you just look, um, you know, Pat Riley, Chuck Daly. Um, it, Another interesting story. I'm working at ESPN. I'm hosting the NBA Today show, and we had new management come in, and they weren't television people; they were newspaper people. They brought in some good ideas, um, but we're looking at the NBA Finals. Was it 88, 89? I forget. But it's the Lakers in Detroit, and the series starts in Los Angeles. Um, First practices are on Monday. It's Saturday, and they haven't decided whether or not they're going to send me out to cover the finals. And I'm saying, well, we're the NBA show. We have to. No, you might be better off staying here and reviewing tapes and giving insights. I said, this is the biggest show in the NBA. We need. So finally on Sunday they decide to send me out, and in their wisdom they decide that I'm doing not only the NBA Today show out there, but I'm also reporting for Sports Center. And there was something else that the NBA. We did a thing called the NBA Beat, um, was in there. So I get out there Sunday night, whatever it was, and then I'm thrown right into this thing, and I just there's no room to stop. You just got to get everything done. And I had known of Riley and Daly, and I had maybe interviewed them once or twice. I didn't know them. I go out to the forum in Los Angeles, and Riley's getting practice started. And I said, Pat, Larry Burnett with ESPN, I'm doing the NBA Today show. You know, is it possible that I could get a couple of minutes to sit you down? And he says to me, let me get practice started, and I'll come over and do the interview. I mean, I get chills. I get chills now, so many years later. And he came over and sat down, and we did the interview, and we got what we needed. And he was great to work with. Pistons come in. I go over to Chuck Daly. Chuck, kind of in a bind here. I got to get all this stuff done. Can I get a couple minutes with you? Let me get practice started, and I'll come over and sit down.
Hmm.
I mean, I couldn't ask for more. Those are the two biggest coaches in the game at that time. Legends. Legends. And they took the time to sit down with little old me from ESPN at that time. And I'll never forget that. I will never forget that. So, I mean, those are some of the people. I could name a list that would just go on and on. Jack Nicklaus, Arnold Palmer, um, Jimmy Connors, John Mack. These are all people I was able to talk with and be around. Chris Everett, Martina Navratilova. Um, you know, like I said, when I step back and look at it, I I impress myself, but there's something in me that says, what didn't you do?
There's still work to
And
be
that's
done.
still work to be done. Whether it's out there or available, I don't know. But sometimes sometimes you have to be satisfied with the now and what you've done. And you got to quit looking at that carrot out there as to what I didn't do or what I didn't accomplish or did I reach all of my goals. And that's something, at my ripe old age, I'm still dealing with now. So,
And that, well, that answered my question. I always had that hunger, wanting more. Even after you
yeah.
accomplish something, you still want it. And you just answered my question. As you get older, does that start to die out eventually, or do you just still feel like you got to chase something? So it's
No,
still
there's
out there.
not me. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I still feel that I've got a lot in the tank. I still feel there's a lot that I would like to do. I don't know if the opportunities will be there. There's not a lot of people out there hiring people my age. I was fortunate this last year. I had been semi-retired for about 4 years since moving to Nevada, and I got a call from the University of Nevada asking me if I would do the Nevada women's basketball games on radio, and I did, and I had a great time. And the one thing about semi-retirement was that I kept thinking, man, I need a focus. I need a direction. I need to find a way to use my talents and my skills. Um, because whether we like it or not, so much of what we are is what we do. Um, and so it was important for me to get that opportunity and to jump in and to find out that I could still do it and I did still have it and I had the enthusiasm for it. Um, and if we move forward, that's great. I had a great time. It was a good season, but it still burns. The fire still burns, and I I know what I'm good at, and I know what I bring to the table. Um, it's just as you get older in the business, it becomes harder and harder to get opportunities. People look and see, a Bob Costas or a Jim Nance, my friend Mike Breen, Kevin Harlan, um, Uh, there, there, there's a pyramid in the business, um, and very few people at the top. And those people at the top usually aren't leaving those jobs unless they do something really stupid or they get fired. Um, and the rest of us are kind of down in the pyramid somewhere. Um, that's why people always say, "Oh, I want to get into sportscasting because you don't have to work really hard and you make a lot of money." Well, wrong and wrong. Um, there's a lot of work involved in it if you do it right. Um, and for some people, there's a lot of money, but for a lot of people, there isn't. And as it is in many businesses, the higher you go up the ladder and the more money you start to make, the easier it is for them to get rid of you and bring in somebody who's much younger who will work for much less.
Preaching the truth
And
there.
that's part of the whole age thing there. And there's very few people who beat that, but some do.
All right, as we begin to wrap this up, I just want to say thank you for coming on and telling your story. And well, I got some. You got anything else to share before we wrap it up?
Well, two things. People are always asking for advice, and so what advice would you give an aspiring sportscaster? My first is moisturize. Um, and people laugh at me when I say it because you put this makeup on all the time and it dries out your face. And if you don't moisturize, it can you start wrinkling a lot earlier than you would like. The guy who is the epitome of moisturizing, I remember covering the Lakers back in the late '80s. I went into the locker room and there's Byron Scott in there. He's just lathering himself up with this stuff after his shower, and he just said, "Got to moisturize. You got to moisturize." So there's that, and the other is this: I'm always asked what advice for somebody who wants to get into the business. I say two things. One, first get your eyes checked. I want you to make sure you have good vision because I want you to go into this business with your eyes wide open. I want you to know what you're getting into. And as we talked earlier, I want you to know that tunnel vision doesn't work. You gotta take a little from the left, a little from the right, and here from there, and one from column B, and you gotta be versatile and flexible. But you gotta know that this is a business where many times they'll tell you, you don't like it here. We got 50 people standing in line. Will take your job. Um, my other comment to them is this: I want you to eat as much as possible. And again, they look at me like I'm crazy. Why would you want us to eat so much? I said, because I want you to have a gigantic butt. What? Yeah, because you may need something to fall back on in this business. It doesn't always work out the way you want it to work. So have something to fall back on, whether it's a business degree or it's another talent that you have. Uh, Always good to keep something on the burner because you never know when management is going to change and the guy who hired you is going to say, I don't like the way this guy looks. I don't like the way he sounds, especially television. Very, very cosmetic, very um, uh, uh, subjective. Um, and the guy who hired you may not be the guy who's there in 6 months. So eat as much as you can, get a big butt, have something to fall back
Well said. Great advice.
on. We'll see.
Now, if anybody wants to get a hold of you, contact you in a way just to reach out to you, how can they do that?
Probably the easiest way. I have a website. It's larrybmedia.com. It's got pictures, gallery, demo tapes, all kinds of stuff on there. And there should be a link to contact me there. So that's probably the best way to do it. And I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter, and I've got this really, really clever nickname on Twitter. It's Larry Burnett. So it's really hard to find.
Larry Porter. I see what
Larry
you're doing.
Burnett, Burnett. Yeah. So
Cool.
I'm reachable. I'm reachable.
All right. Well, thanks, Larry, for coming on and telling your story. I'm pretty sure, without a doubt, it's touched and inspired somebody out there.
Well, I
But
appreciate the time. It's nice to talk about the good old days.
going back in time. But anyway,
Yeah, 24 cents for gas.
yeah. Thanks to everybody that's been watching, listening. Till next time, this is Chris.